Well, a couple of weeks ago, I'm just basically making videos and reading, give my take on speculations on NHL updates, where I was saying that bubble hockey was likely going to be happening for the 2020-21 NHL season. Whenever that deemed is going to happen, but now that we're in the Stanley Cup Finals and we're almost on the verge of crowning the Stanley Cup Champion for 2020, which is much later than we want, but Gary Bettman always gives his speech of the league and plans and speculation, especially during his time at the start of the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, a couple weeks ago, it sounded like NHL may have to consider doing the bubble, which has been successful for the playoffs, starting all the way back to late July, when we started with the 2014 playoffs, the play-in series, round robin, and going through all the playoffs up until now we're in the Stanley Cup Finals, and the big number has been 0. There has been 0 COVID cases once everyone got into the bubble, and it's definitely worked like a charm as planned. However, next season is definitely going to be a challenge in how many games there is. I mean, I made my video talking about the bubble hockey is likely, but after hearing Gary Bettman's speech, does not sound like we are going to have bubble hockey. And no, we're not talking about all 31 teams are going to play their games at tabletop bar hockey, tabletop bubble hockey that way. We're talking about players, teams hosting cities, hosting bubble hockey. It does sound like that that will not happen, and you would probably say it wouldn't be as practical either, because the NHL also still wants to play 82 games for the 2020-21 season, and I think that is still a pipe dream as well. If the requirements is that we want the 2021-22 season to start, let's say at the beginning of October, like traditionally, especially when we'll have 32 teams once the Seattle Kraken come in, that the NHL wants to have a full season, if possible next season, and have the Stanley Cup awarded by the end of June, so that free agent frenzy, the draft free agent frenzy and all that stuff, off-season stuff, can happen traditionally. And then there's also hopeful that, especially even Bill Daly, the deputy commissioner, also saying that they're hopeful that maybe fans will be allowed at the game. Of course, it might be a phased-in approach. And then the other thing that could be complicating things as well is the border closure between the Canada and U.S. border. As in, like Major League Baseball and the NBA, where you have one Canadian team, and they could just simply play them in the U.S. for the whole season and go on from there. You have 7 Canadian teams in the NHL. That will make things a little more complicated. And also, getting back into the, playing in a bubble for like 6 months. Whenever the season starts, I mean, some are thinking that December 1st, that's the date when they want the next season to start, but there still might be thinking that might not be till December 15th, or maybe after Christmas, or January 1st, but I think the 82 games might still be a pipe dream. I'm almost thinking the most likely scenario that's going to happen is it's almost going to be a lockout short season, but compressed to try to get as many games in and to cut down on travel. I don't think, this is my personal speculation, that I don't think you're going to see interconference play next season to try to get as many games as possible. Try to cut down on travel. And then the other thing that the NHL is also looking at is looking at other leagues that maybe, just maybe, I know the safest way to do it as possible is the bubble model, and it's done it for a couple months for the playoffs, so you can crown the Stanley Cup champion, is that everyone's isolated away to have to, follow rules and just to be away from everything. It's safe, obviously, but then, when you have family matters or, just your personal health and well-being, I know I've been feeling it myself personally, just trying to be in the bubble as much as I can, but trying to also work more in the office just to have that routine and not spend as much time at home. And I do enjoy making videos like this, for example. But even then, I only got so much time to make videos, and I'm still looking at eventually upgrading my equipment so that maybe I can render my videos faster and make more videos. But that's what I'm getting at, why the bubble model for next season won't likely happen for that reason as well. But when you see the Major League Baseball, yes, they had their speed bumps, and I made my video talking about that Major League Baseball actually been able to actually get their 60-game season in. Yes, there were speed bumps, and there were definitely some times where games were postponed and they had to compress it with double headers, and that could be something you might see next season with the NHL. It won't matter either way if fans aren't allowed at the game, that they could play a game in the morning and a game in the afternoon. I know during the playoffs, I mean, now that we've got into the later part of the playoffs and almost about to award a Stanley Cup Champion, that the game started at normal times. But it did feel weird that at the start of the playing series in the first couple of rounds, that it felt weird that I'm working away and they're like, oh, it's 11 o'clock my time, and oh, there's a game that started, and you're following along trying to figure out what happened elsewhere. I know that could be possibly as well. And then my personal feeling on, depending on, the border, because I know that you got the Quarantine Act and you have to isolate for 14 days and players coming in and out. That's why I think there might be a possibility that Canadian teams might have to play in the U.S. I mean, they're going to have to try to either have it where the teams will have to play either still close by. I mean, I'm not too sure. Let's say, for example, the Calgary Flames. If, let's say, at the start of the year, if they're not going to allow fans in the game yet, and about the border closure, depending on how long it goes, I mean, could the Flames play their home games somewhere in Montana? Maybe potentially, expose the NHL to different markets. The only other practical thing I could think of with the Calgary Flames, let's say if, to make it a little easier to have teams play out of their home city because of the border, because you got 7 Canadian teams, as opposed to just 1. The only other thing I could think of is that the Calgary Flames would play in Stockton, where the farm team is, and then also if you need to call someone up or due to injury or whatever, that you're already right there, and then the player could just, drop their, Stockton bag and pick up their Flames bag, and, that's the only thing I can think of, just to be close by, and then I guess maybe home games would be playing in there. I mean, it's all fluid right now, and I'll continue to plan to make videos on it, but that's how I can almost think might happen. Basically, all the Canadian teams, Western Canadian teams, have their farm team out on the West Coast. I mean, it's closer for calling up players, but I mean, it still remains to be seen. And of course, it also still remains to be seen is if fans will be phased in eventually throughout the season. I mean, could it be a third of the fans, half the fans, or maybe a full stadium? We call it the Sea of Red in Calgary, although we use the letter C, but let's just picture a sea. It'd almost be just like a little puddle of red instead. I wonder if I'll call it that. Let's say, if the restrictions still allow fans of the game, but not as many. I wonder if I'll call it the puddle of red just temporarily. I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas, but I know that the other thing that NHL's keeping an eye on is NFL. Is that the NFL is still playing their games as scheduled. In some stadiums, some are allowed, but not as many, while others are still no fans. I mean, but the National Football League, all their teams is obviously in the U.S., so they don't have to worry about going over to the international border. But there's just still a lot of unknowns. And then, of course, one of my inspirations for being more active on YouTube is the hockey guy. He made a video on talking about how many games that the league could get in. Let's just say if they played like every other day. I know that would compress the schedule a lot more if you played a game every 2 days instead of, on average, it's 2.5. That he looked at 3 scenarios where we looked at if the NHL were to start December 1st. That I think he pictured out that if they played a game every 2 days, I think I remember seeing that they can get a 78 game season in, and then like the middle of December that went down to 70, and then the beginning of January I think that went down to like 60. And he also looked at going in the past from basically all the way back till when the NHL was formed till this past season, and he threw in a couple of lockout shortened seasons on when the season started and when the Stanley Cup was awarded and how many teams were in the league. And I know the latest that the season started, because we had 2 lockout short seasons, and both of those seasons, they played 48 games, but in those seasons, teams only played everyone in their own conference, and it was spread out like, normal pace. Like it was sort of compressed. I mean, there was no All-Star game, and I'm going to say next season with the NHL, forget about the Winter Classic. I'm thinking they haven't officially pulled it, but I don't think the Winter Classic, the All-Star game, will happen next season. Well, I mean, the All-Star game, in my mind, is now just a glorified 3-on-3 pond hockey tournament. It's kind of hard to have an actual game, if you know what I mean, when you have all the All-Stars. I mean, it's fun for the city to host it and see all the big names, and the NHL to maybe potentially try up some new gimmicks to present the game to fans in the future. But I know the special events won't happen next season. I mean, if fans aren't allowed the game, could we see some back-to-backs? Let's say, for example, Calgary-Edmonton or Calgary-Vancouver. Could they schedule, let's say, Calgary playing Vancouver or Edmonton Friday night, Saturday night, both in, let's say, Calgary or Vancouver or Edmonton, and then try to do that every weekend? Try to, have the Canadian teams play each other back-to-back. And I know I saw another scenario on Hockey Buzz on ideas, and if the season cannot start till December or even January, and if they want to have all 82 games in, and they still want the Stanley Cup awarded by late June, so that we don't have summer hockey, and then have everything go back to normal schedule for 21-22, could we potentially see, I know this would be very iffy, but Major League Baseball this season to get their back-to-backs in, doubleheaders I should say, under these circumstances. And I know, for example, when we used to have the Calgary Vipers, if their games are postponed, a doubleheader, they had 7-inning games. So there was someone speculating that maybe they'll have like 15-minute periods or whatever, have a shorter game to have back-to-backs played in the same day. I mean, that's one idea. I know that definitely could stir up a debate, but we're already in different times as is. Even then, you almost got to wonder about the legitimacy of everything. But when you already have everyone playing more games in a shorter time, it's all about trying to obviously maximize revenue. And the fact that the US TV deal for the NHL expires after next season, so there's definitely some money on the line. And even with the Rogers deal on the line, that the league will lose out on that money if they aren't on TV next year. But there's just lots of speculation unknowns right now on about how next season is going to go. But it sounds more likely that the bubble hockey is not going to be happening next season, just so that teams can go home. I know that's the other thing you have to figure out too. Let's say, going back to my Canadian teams playing in either nearby American markets. I mean, let's say the Flames playing in Montana, or maybe Oregon, or maybe Utah. I'm just throwing out cities right now, states, that how are they going to see their families for the first couple months before eventually maybe fans will be allowed and border restrictions are eased? Because it doesn't sound like the government's going to cooperate with the NHL. They didn't cooperate with Major League Baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Toronto Raptors, when the whole NBA was playing in the ESPN Wide World Sports in Orlando, Florida. But the Toronto Blue Jays at the last second, after it looked like the government allowed them that they could play their games with no fans in Toronto, and allow teams to come in and play and, traveling over the border, that ultimately the Toronto Blue Jays were either looking to play in Pittsburgh, or if ultimately their AAA team in Buffalo. And that's why I thought that maybe the Calgary Flames, if the NHL was in that situation, that I could think of either a nearby state, but I'm not too sure where an arena would be. I mean, I don't know any big arenas right now that could house a NHL team temporarily just to be home with the Flames away from Calgary for a couple months before they can go back to Calgary. That is in Stockton, where at least that's where the farm team is. But that's just all my personal speculation and feelings on next season. I ultimately think what's going to happen is that we're going to have as many games as possible. It's almost going to kind of be like a lockout shortened season, but with more than 48 games. But I think we're not going to see interconference play. So I guess that means the Calgary Flames will not get to play Ottawa, Toronto, or Montreal next season, or we won't get to play against Pittsburgh and Sidney Crosby, or Washington against Alexander Ovechkin. But if that means trying to get as many games in as possible. I did like what the hockey guy did in his video looking at scenarios for next season and trying to get as many games as possible. But I think that's what's going to likely be next season. It would probably be worth it in the long run to at least still get games on TV, still get a renewed TV deal with an American network. I mean, I'm not too sure what American network would be anxious to sign up with the NHL. I mean, you got the NBC. I mean, could the NHL go back on Fox? I would say if they do, there's two things that they should do. Don't bring back that Fox track. And maybe bring back those robots, those animated robots that when the one team scores, the robots come alive from the scoreboard, and the team that scores destroys the other robot. I mean, that was kind of funny when I saw that when the NHL was on Fox almost 25 years ago, believe it or not. That was the era when Anaheim first came into the league. But I mean, the NHL is definitely critical in that, and it's just trying to stay relevant. And right now, it's just with all sports going on at the same time, and here we are towards the end of September. We're talking about eventually Stanley Cup being crowned. That this is the time where I should be getting excited about preseason and looking ahead to next season after all the free agent frenzy. But speaking of all that, well, in a couple weeks we'll have the draft, or less than a week and a half we'll have the draft and free agent frenzy. So I'll make videos on that, and I'll keep making update videos about what I feel about the NHL's plans to have 2020-21 season happen. But that's all I'm throwing out there, and that's based on all the information that's put out there. But it does not sound like bubble hockey is happening, but they'll be playing in cities. Canadian teams are still up in the air at this point with the Canada-U.S. border closure. But what do you think of everything? I mean, I think it's a pipe dream right now that we'll have 82 games. If you're giving me the parameters that next season will not start December 1st, December 15th, after Christmas, January 1st, and that you want to have the Stanley Cup awarded by late June so you can have the draft free agent frenzy so you don't have hockey playing in the summer, that seems a little tight. Unless you can do back-to-backs, almost 2 games in a day, or as they say, for example, have Canadian teams play each other just Fridays and Saturday. That way, because I know you hear that with the U.S., not as many people watch U.S. games in the U.S. when there's a Canadian team involved, but definitely up here in Canada, we'll definitely get more excited for an all-Canadian matchup. But what do you think? So as I say, if you want to follow along this Calgary sports fan's journey, home to Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly talk Calgary sports on my channel. Definitely had a lot on my plate, on my mind to talk about NHL with 2020-21. We don't know yet at this stage. There's just too many unknowns and speculatives. But I also do personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experiences say I'm on the road or at a sporting event. So if it all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch too, follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey. You know what you need to do, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below for other ways you can follow me and maybe get any updates on what I plan to do on my channel. So as I say, go Flames go. As of this recording, the Tampa Bay Lightning actually have a 3-1 lead on the Dallas Stars in the Stanley Cup Final. I would say if the Tampa Bay Lightning do manage to finish and win the Stanley Cup, I'll just say it'd just be a little less painful to watch the Tampa Bay Lightning win the Stanley Cup this year than, let's say, 16 years ago. Just putting it out there. And even with the Dallas Stars, I mean, I know some people say, would it be a little easier to say, well, you eventually lost the team that eventually won the Stanley Cup? I would say no, but it wouldn't be as painful if I eventually saw Dallas win the Stanley Cup, but it's just, I mean, it is what it is. But it's, given all the circumstances that's gone on this year, the fact that we actually are eventually going to crown the Stanley Cup champion actually is encouraging, considering that there were times it looked like it wasn't. And same with next season. There will be a season. I mean, there's protocols in place about teams starting to train again, kind of similar to going into this bubble. But the other thing you got to throw in is you got teams that haven't played since March. So yeah. So anyway, as I say, I'll see you in the next video.